I've always tried to be as open as I can about my writing process. I've tried to share things as I've gone along. It's difficult because I don't want to put spoilers out there, but at the same time, I really value the kind of connection I have with my readers, who kind of follow the journey and seem to, I suppose, help me quite a lot with encouragement along the way. And since I've been writing something now that's outside the Gaslit Empire, something that's different, I haven't really been sharing this as yet, but I thought it was time because I've always been as open as I possibly can with you, and I think I can share this now. So what I'm going to do is read from the very opening of what is the new novel. I'm not going to tell you its working title, that might well change. This starts out with what could be a prologue. You see, it's all up in the air, everything could change. But there's a prologue, and then there's a bit of the first chapter, and I'm going to read the two. The prologue is arranged as verses. It's arranged in verse form. I'm also going to hope that my voice carries on because I've got a bit of a frog in the throat. So here we go, part one. The seven walked into the land, the mothers of the mothers, saying, "Let the creatures drum time for us, and for our children and their children, until the fire of the last day is burned to embers, and the embers have fallen to white ash." On the first day they saw the brown hare, bounding through a sea of grass. They gave the first day the name of the hare, and for honouring him with a name day, the hare gifted the first mother with the knowing of dreams. On the second day they saw the least weasel, drinking from a spring. His name was made the name of the second day, and he gifted the second mother with the knowing of knots. The creature of the third day was the pale-bellied bat. Its gift was dark sight for the third mother and for all the line who would follow her. The fourth day was named for the black eel, who crossed their path weaving the slope towards the river. Its gift was wayfinding. In the pines of the fifth day they saw the woodcat, who gave the gift of hunting, and the aurochs of the sixth day gifted fastness. But in the land of the seventh day they saw no creatures. The last mother said, "Am I to have no gift? Is this day to have no name? And who is there for me to honour?" She wept until her eyes were red, but kneeling to wash her face in the cold of the lake, she saw the reflection of the tree branch above her, and the crow who had followed her through all the 7 days to watch and to listen. So it was that the name of the last day became the name of the crow, who gifted the knowing of minds to the seventh mother, and to all the daughters who would follow her, until the fire of the last day burned to embers, and the embers fell to white ash. Chapter 1. It was a narrow house, with a long narrow garden and a shed at the very end, which the family had always called the Kremlin. Coming back to it had been set as a test for Ellie, if she could get through the summer without having another episode. Then she might be trusted to try for a job, perhaps evening classes. Little steps, her therapist had said. They'd cleared out the back room first, filling 6 large boxes, which had been labelled Keep, Tip, Oxfam, Auntie Nadia, and Bombfire. Finding the half-moon spectacles in the roll-top desk had been a shock, but Ellie had handled it. Then, on the 5th day back over breakfast, her mother gestured towards the window with a piece of toast. "It's a fine day. Why don't you have a go at Grandad's shed?" "OK," Ellie said, keeping her voice bright in spite of everything. "Are you sure?" She felt the prickle of sweat between her shoulders. "You worry too much." Standing by the kitchen window, she considered the problem. A brick path lay immediately outside, and the herb bed overrun with mint. Then came the lawn, which her grandfather had called a bourgeois indulgence. In truth, he loved it, because the children had loved to play there. Further back were black currants, gooseberries and raspberries on one side, rhubarb on the other. All this she would need to cross. She couldn't remember what he'd grown beyond the fruit bushes. Cabbages and runner beans, perhaps? It was all thistles now. The trick was to breathe from the belly, not from the top of the chest, to focus on her mindfulness exercises, feeling the cool of the air passing over her nostrils as she inhaled. But she still found herself scanning the sky before opening the door. One step in front of the other, brick path, lawn, fruit bushes, hurrying, certain her mother would be keeping watch from the back bedroom. That was the point of the exercise, Ellie thought, to see her fail. Ivy had grown over the outside of the shed, half covering the window, tendrils prying the glass from its rotting frame. She wrenched the door open and jumped into cover. Her heart slowed. There would be spiders, she thought, and woodlice. Those she could deal with. The lawnmower was responsible for the smell of petrol. It was an antique, but not in a good way. She wiped down the handles and hefted it out into the sunshine. That made enough room for her to get further in, further from the door. An old workbench ran along the right-hand side, but the tool rack stood empty. She wondered whether the chisels and saws might have been stolen. If so, the thieves had left the china plate on the wall, from which Lenin's face stared out. Her grandfather had taught himself to read Russian, but grandmother, who always voted Conservative, wouldn't let him bring copies of Pravda into the house. After she died, he carried on with his old habit, keeping them in the shed. "'Tis all the truth," he told her. Then he'd read a passage in his Derbyshire accent, making the Russian words sound homely. The newspapers were damp and covered in cobwebs. Having lifted a few with the garden fork, Ellie found the paper half rotten. The compost heap was close enough, so she hefted them onto it and hurried back inside. His aluminium ashtray had fallen onto the floor. The shock of finding it made her heart trip. She'd been 6 years old when he taught her to roll his cigarettes. She held it to the window to see the stamped outline of St. Benedict's Cathedral. It might look better after a clean, but no one in the family smoked, and felt wrong that anyone else might use it. Piece by piece she gathered his things. The empty tobacco tins could go to Oxfam. There were collectors for every kind of old junk. The coffee mug had been made by Auntie Nadia. Mum would have to decide what to do with that. Glass jars full of rusting screws and nails could be thrown out. The Lenin plate she would keep for herself, partly to remember him, partly for all the people it would scandalise. He would have liked that. Having loaded everything into a wooden fruit box, she stood at the shed door and regarded the distance to the kitchen. There'd been a robin pecking around under the fruit bushes and a blackbird song from somewhere, but nothing worse. Taking a breath from her belly, she lifted the box and set out. Her instinct was to look up, check the skies again, but her mother was watching from the window, and her therapist had told her to resist those urges, so she focused on the ground, dark soil around the rhubarb plants, the edge of the lawn looking shaggy, a scattering of daisies. And then one large black feather caught in the grass. How stupid, she thought, to have expected the danger to have come from above. She felt the panic approaching like a thing from outside herself. The air seemed to shift, getting out of its way. The roaring in her ears could have been an underground train, and she standing on the tracks. For 3 steps she couldn't breathe. Then her foot caught the edge of the brick path and she fell. The box crashed to the ground. I'll leave it there. Love to hear what you think, but that's my work in progress. And my hope hope is that I can finish it this year, hopefully this summer, but we will see.